Welcome everyone to Straight Science. Straight Science is an evening seminar series put on by University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus here in this room, and also University of Alaska Fairbanks Alaska Sea Grant here in Nome. Both Northwest Campus and Alaska Sea Grant, we are public servants of the Bering Strait region. We serve all peoples of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, St. Lawrence Island Yupik, and Central Yupik peoples. So tonight we have Matt Rustand, a biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge. He has traveled up on a ship called the Tekla, which is currently at the Port of Nome. And so he's already had a journey to get here. And he's had a journey just getting the electronics fixed for this. And their mission is to stop in Nome. They've been doing several good outreach events in town. And I don't know if people here have been to the ship already. Has anyone been? Yeah. So the Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge, I was saying, is not something we normally hear from. They're not a group we hear from. However, they are coming up. I think the last time you guys were here was 2018. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing Matt's presentation because the Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge extends from the Gulf of Alaska across the Aleutians and on into the Bering Strait region and further north. They actually have parts of the refuge are the lands, and I think some of like Sledge Island, you'll tell us about. So some of our lands in this region are actually part of the National Maritime Wildlife Refuge. So we'll hear more about that, and we'll hear that Matt is a seabird biologist, and their mission is they're coming in, they're doing some outreach, and then I think you're probably looking at birds around here. We'll hear from him, and they're going up north. So they're going to be doing a survey on the seabirds in the region and on up north. So welcome again. And we'll let you take it from there, Matt, and tell us all about the National Wildlife Refuge and your trip.
All right, will do. Thank you, Gay. Thanks for those that showed up here tonight, and thanks for the people that are online. And as Gay said, my name is Matt Rustand, and I'm here to talk about our refuge. So first off, what is a National Wildlife Refuge? National Wildlife Refuge is a designated area, typically a contiguous tract of land or water, managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and that's part of the Department of Interior. These refuges are created to conserve, manage, and where appropriate, sometimes restore fish, wildlife, and plant resources in their habitats. And we do this for both the present kind of population of Americans and for future generations as well. Each refuge is unique and established with specific goals that targets the conservation of native species dependent on those lands and waters. Okay, so how was Alaska Maritime created? It was composed of 11 previously established refuges created in the early 1900s, early to mid 1900s, in addition to new lands designated in ANILCA, and these lands were consolidated into one refuge in 1980. Now, the rationale for consolidating these kind of far-flung sites as one refuge was marine wildlife. The concept was to consolidate management of marine refuges under one staff to bring consistency to the protection of Alaska's seabirds, its marine mammals, and remote islands across thousands of miles of coastlines. Now, when Congress created the Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge, they laid out 5 core purposes: to conserve fish and wildlife, to fulfill treaty obligations with respect to fish and wildlife, to provide for continued subsistence uses, to provide scientific research on marine resources, and to ensure water quality and quantity. So these are the guiding kind of principles behind every project that we do on the refuge. So the Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge stretches across 3,000 miles of coastline, making it one of the most far-reaching and diverse refuges in the nation. It's working. Its boundaries cover an enormous portion of the Alaska's coast, from southeast Alaska through the Gulf of Alaska and across the Aleutian Chain and up into the Bering and Chukchi seas. The scale is what defines this refuge and defines our work, because managing and understanding a system this large requires long-term monitoring, coordinated operations, and a clear sense of how all these areas fit together. There is a delay. There we go.
And it's changing this as well, so very
Okay.
good.
So to put it in perspective, if the Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge were in the lower 48, we would have lands that extend from coast to coast, from Georgia to California, and from Texas to Minnesota.
We'll find our rhythm.
So how do you get around in a maritime refuge? Meet our refuge transportation, which, as Gay mentioned, is here at the Port of Nome. This is the research vessel Tekla, and the Tekla supports the refuge mission while also allowing us to partner with groups like the Invasive Species Program, National Marine Fisheries Service, or NIMS, and the Alaska Volcano Observatory, and then others like universities and countless other groups. So covering thousands of miles each summer, up to 15,000 miles in the summer, the research vessel Tekla is the backbone of our operations, enabling access to the remote islands and headlands that define our refuge. So when we talk about this refuge, we're talking about a setting unlike anywhere else in the country. Now, the refuge includes more than 2,500 islands and headlands. It's home to roughly 40 million seabirds and one of the largest concentrations of seabirds on the planet, and hundreds of thousands of marine mammals that depend on these waters. It's truly an ecosystem operating on a massive scale. And when you look across this refuge, the common thread is the ocean. Every island, every colony, every species we monitor is shaped by the marine environment. So the marine environment is dynamic with species large and small interacting with one another.
Wow.
It supports life for a variety of species and some of the world's most beautiful and stunning creatures. And these marine areas are a key part of what this refuge protects. And what we are about most of all is seabirds, millions and millions of seabirds. The Alaska Maritime Refuge isn't just important regionally, it's the heart of seabird nesting for all of North America. The sheer number of birds that rely on these islands make this one of the most significant seabird regions on Earth. So here, oh, that sounds not good. Here's a glimpse of a truly spectacular sights of an auklet colony on the refuge during the breeding season. So I was hoping some sound would come through that, but that's all right. But what's kind of showing is like just the great mass of birds that can be on these colonies. And when you're sitting in a colony like this and seeing it, it truly is amazing. If the sound would come through, the sounds are amazing as well.
So this looks like what people might see at St. Lawrence Island, Diomede. I don't know if there's auklets at Bluff. I've never been there. Has anyone been to Bluff? Seen auklets there? Not like that. Puffins. Puffins.
So one of the remarkable things about this refuge is the variety of seabirds that call it home. Over 30 seabird species nest within this refuge, including auklets, murres, puffins, kittiwakes, murrelets, gulls, terns, and more. And the refuge supports seabirds that exhibit a variation in foraging styles. Some feed at the surface, while others are capable of deep dives. And the refuge provides a variety of nesting habitats, including steep and rugged cliffs that support several cliff nesting species, and habitat for others that prefer crevices or burrows. The areas we manage supply the critical breeding habitat these species depend on, with species occupying its own distinct niche in the marine ecosystem. Because of the geographic spread of our refuge is so great, we've broken it administratively into 5 units, split amongst 3 biologists. So with our current staffing, there's 1 biologist that's responsible for the Gulf of Alaska unit, and the Alaska Peninsula Unit, another for the Aleutian Islands Unit, and then I'm responsible for the Bering Sea Unit and the Chukchi Sea Unit. However, it does take a team effort to pull off monitoring on such a large scale, and many others at our office are needed to support this work. So this geographic spread also means the refuge contains a diverse amount of available habitat to wildlife. So I'll take you through a quick tour through some of the diversity of habitats found across the refuge. And on refuge islands off southeast Alaska, rainforests tend to dominate the landscape. So the heavy rainfall in the dense vegetation and rich forest structure create a unique nesting habitat for species we don't find elsewhere on the refuge.
What are those pink flags?
So they're marking burrows, or they're searching.
Cool.
And shrubs and maritime tundra make up a broad, open part of the refuge's landscape. And these areas are dominated by low shrubs and hardy tundra plants that are able to withstand strong winds and salt exposure and short growing seasons. And this type of terrain is common across the Alaska Peninsula and parts of the Aleutians. Ooh, too far. And then coastal grass meadows and beaches form another broad part of the refuge's landscape. These areas are shaped by constant marine influence and support low, wind-swept vegetation along open shorelines. They occur across sections of the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Islands and represent kind of the exposed coastal terrain common in much of the refuge. Sea cliffs are present at many of our islands and support a variety of ledge nesting species. And these sheer rock faces host some of the largest and densest seabird colonies anywhere in Alaska. And then finally, up here in the far north, upland scree and Arctic tundra dominate. The vegetation is low and sparse, and the rugged slopes create specialized habitat for cliff nesting seabirds and other cold-adapted wildlife. So right here in Nome, we're positioned at the eastern edge of the Bering Sea Unit. And this is an area characterized by large seabird colonies, kind of distinct island groups, local community connections, and a rapid environmental change. So these are the major geographic areas within the Bering Sea Unit. The Pribilof Islands and St. Matthew Islands include some of the largest seabird colonies in Alaska. And then Hagemeister Island and the Sand Islands represent key coastal locations within the unit. And then right here in Norton Sound, you have Bluff and Topcock Head are examples of refuge lands located along the eastern portion of the Bering Sea coastline. So what's unique about the Bering Sea? Sea ice is a major factor in the Bering Sea. It forms seasonal ice edge areas that support high productivity, and its presence or absence affects where seabirds find prey and how marine mammals use the region. And secondly, large parts of Beringia remain ice-free during the past ice ages, which allowed plants and animals to persist here. So this history contributed to the biodiversity we see in the region today. And then finally, the Bering Sea is warming quickly, and environmental changes show up here earlier and more strongly than many other marine areas. Another unique characteristic of the Bering Sea is the number of large seabird colonies. And when you look at this map, the Bering Sea kind of really stands out. Those large dots show the biggest seabird colonies in Alaska, and most of them are clustered right here in this Bering Sea region. This is where seabird life is concentrated on a massive scale. Now, when we look at MERS alone, the pattern becomes even stronger. The biggest MER colonies and most of the biomass are concentrated right here in the Bering Sea, supporting an enormous portion of the entire North American MER population. Now, moving to the Pribilofs, red-legged kittiwakes have an extremely limited global distribution, and a great portion of them nest in the Pribilof Islands, making this region critically important for this species. And then lastly,
Wait a minute,
Yes.
what's the difference between that one and our seagulls?
So here we have black-legged kittiwakes. So they are a different species. Obviously, the distinct thing is one has red legs and one has black legs. But the black legs also would have a longer bill and their head shape's a little bit different. And so they are two different unique species.
Can they interbreed? Like you could have a black and orange legged bird or
I
red
don't
and whatever.
believe so. Like on
I guess if there's species that can't.
right other islands that I work on, St. George and St. Paul, like you'll find black legs and red legs in the same kind of cliff structures.
Oh,
But they're
they
independent.
don't hybridize.
Hmm.
No, okay, thank you.
And they actually occupy different parts of the cliffs. Like if you start to see the nest and where they build them, red legs tend to be more tucked into areas that have a little overhang and kind of smaller structures and their nests are a lot more mud and they're packed down, where a black leg nests tend to be much larger, grassier, a little bit more exposed.
Okay,
So
probably because we can't see the online audience right now, probably be good we should probably repeat the question when it's
oh,
asked.
thank you.
I just thought of it.
Yep.
Is there anyone living on Matthew Island, St. Matthew?
No, there's not.
The
How
question,
big is it?
The question was, is there anybody living on St. Matthew Island? And no, there isn't. So it's got the tagline of the most remote place in North America, I believe, or is it on Earth? I think it's in North America. But it truly is kind of like smack dab in the middle of the Bering Sea there. So there's three islands there, St. Matthew and Hall Island. I guess Pinnacle is a more of a rock structure, but I'll get into that area a little bit more in depth here, because we did make a stop there on our way up here to Nome. So one of the last unique facts about the Bering Sea unit is here we have St. Matthew Island is home to two endemic species, the McKay's bunting, which is only known to breed on this island, and the singing vole, which only exists on this island. So yeah, we were just there a couple days ago, and we were lucky enough to see and hear both of these species while we were there.
do they sing?
They do. You can hear them singing away when you're walking around.
No kidding.
They're harder to get eyes on. You have to be really patient to do that. But so there are refuge lands very close to Nome, including areas near Safety Sound. And then offshore from Nome at Sledge Island, which we visited this morning. So these areas illustrate that refuge managed lands in the Bering Sea are not limited to these distant islands that are far away. Some portions occur right here in your local region. And now these areas also show the range of habitats from shallow coastal waters to isolated offshore islands. So although small, these lands are still protected by refuge designation as well. So further north is the Chukchi Sea unit, which includes some very striking seabird cliffs, especially at Cape Lisburn and Cape Thompson. The geology, winds, and the Arctic marine conditions create a very different environment from other parts of the refuge. So that unit actually extends from the Bering Strait all the way to Icy Cape. So Cape Lisburn is one of the most is a dramatic site in the Chukchi Sea unit. It has towering cliffs and dense concentrations of cliff nesting seabirds along that Arctic coast. I hope this picture shows up well because it shows us this mass of murres that are on that cliff, which is pretty spectacular. And then Cape Thompson has wider tundra slopes and more open terrain and supports significant seabird habitat along the coastline. So these northern capes, along with the rest of the refuge, illustrate the incredible range of habitats we work across. So at Alaska Maritime, we do have a mission and a vision. And our mission is to conserve, protect, and restore the diverse land and waters, wildlife, and cultural resources of the refuge using excellence in education, outreach, and a program of scientific research on marine resources. And our vision is that the refuge is viable is a viable, abundant, and resilient community of marine life which scientists, tribes, and the public are actively engaged to conserve. Is there a question? Yeah.
With the mission statement in mind, are there any impact studies on trawling, which heavily impacts the dietary availability for marine life?
Mhm. So the question was, are there any impact statements on impact studies on trawling, and its impacts on marine life? So with our refuge, we are limited in scope to the lands that we manage. So that tends to be either these islands or cliffs or headlands. There's some areas where it extends a little bit into the ocean, but not much. So it
Wouldn't it be part of the continuity of care of those, because that's a big part is what's available for
Mhm.
them to eat. A lot of the marine life, big marine life, like whales, starving whales, they're showing up. And we're having a lot of trawling problems.
Mhm.
And then you have this mission statement to check. I was just wondering if there was an intention on addressing that based on your mission statement.
So the mission and the vision statement would be, those are like our guiding principles of work that it would have to come back to that in order to do projects on the refuge. Like it has to fulfill that mission and vision that we're trying to do. I understand your question because we do get requested as like a cooperating agency at times to contribute to different NEPA documents or environmental impact statements. So in those instances, we would provide the data that we have in that area for the agency that's doing that analysis.
But it is related no matter who says it is or isn't.
So for his presentation, we can go more into that in the questions. Would that work?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't present when we were.
Okay, sure.
But it's a big issue here, absolutely, the trawling, and we'll hear, maybe their research has looked at if birds are going up and down in number, because he's really focused on bird life.
Yeah.
Yeah, seabird life. So it's a good question.
Wouldn't it move along with marine?
Well, we'll,
Okay.
yep, save it for questions at the end, because I think he's got more to give us on what they found so far, and he just came up, he said he's gonna give us what they saw as well on the way up here.
Okay.
I'm happy that the slide deck's actually working very well.
No, I'm trying to keep up with you.
So, keeping that mission and vision in mind, that kind of guides what we do at this refuge. So we study wildlife and their resources, we manage lands for wildlife, resources and people, and we connect people with the wildlife and resources on the refuge. These are the main things that we do. So first, let's talk about the first bullet there. And I'll talk about the study of wildlife. So seabird monitoring is a core part of our work at this refuge. It's how we understand what's happening in the marine environment over time. Now, we can't monitor all of the 30 species of seabirds breeding on the refuge, so we've decided to select species using different portions of the marine food web, reasoning that the indicators would signal changes at different trophic levels. So by focusing on a few key species, we can track ecosystem conditions without having to monitor every seabird on every island. And we can't monitor everywhere, so we operate 8 annual monitoring locations spread across the whole refuge. So this structure lets us follow trends over time in different geographic regions. St. Lazaria, Chowliot, Iktak, and Boldir are our remote field camps. Each one has 2 or 3 technicians stationed on the islands in dry cabins. St. George and St. Paul are full season field camps stationed within the communities on those islands. And then Cape Lisburn and East Amatuli are short duration camps that use a combination of time-lapse camera technology and some ground field studies to monitor productivity. So to provide an example of what this geographic range We'll move from east to west to give a flavor of what these camps are and what they kind of look like. So St. Lazaria is our easternmost annual site, located off Sitka and home to hundreds of thousands of storm petrels, among several other species. It's one of the smallest islands we work on, and it's close to the town of Sitka and provides kind of straightforward access for easily running a consistent long-term camp. Joliet is much farther west, near the Alaska Peninsula. It's larger, more isolated island, and its position in the middle of the refuge represents that kind of central stretch of coastline between Southeast Alaska and the Aleutians. And then Boulder sits near the far western end of the Aleutians and hosts one of the most diverse seabird colonies really in the Northern Hemisphere. It's one of the most remote islands in the refuge with no nearby communities or infrastructure, kind of highlighting how far west our annual sites extend. So our annual camps are home to, like I said, 2 or 3 technicians for 3 to 4 months every summer. So everything the crew needs from food, gear, communications, and basic supplies has to be brought in on the Tekla and managed on site for the entire stretch. These cabins serve as sleeping quarters. They're the technician's workspace, it's shelter. They're really designed to function in this kind of remote weather exposed locations. Once a crew is dropped off, they stay until pickup. There's no way off. Transportation is entirely dependent on the vessel schedule and safe conditions. So living and working in these remote field cabins takes dedicated and enthusiastic people who are prepared for isolation and very simple accommodations. And we've been very fortunate over the years to have a great number of technicians work for the refuge. And yeah, without them, this work could definitely not get done. So along with our annual sites, we have many periodic sites that are spread across the coastline. Now, these locations are visited less frequently, but together they help kind of give a broader geographic picture of seabird areas throughout the refuge range. 2 sites kind of in close proximity to Nome are Sledge Island and Bluff. Like I said, Sledge Island, we're just there this morning and did a population count. So now these periodic sites, they give us a snapshot of seabird conditions at specific locations across the refuge. Now these visits are short and represent only kind of that point in time, but they help extend our coverage and beyond the annual sites. In reality, they add a broader context to what the long-term data we collect elsewhere and help us see how conditions vary across this refuge wide range. And then finally, periodic sites help broaden our coverage, but the core of our monitoring focuses on understanding change at different timescales. So at the decadal level, we look at population size and long-term trends across the refuge. And at the annual level, we track productivity, diets, overwinter survival, and the environmental variables that influence seabird breeding from year to year. So together, these measurements give us the long view and the short view of what's happening in this marine ecosystem. So now it's important that we communicate our seabird information, our seabird data that we collect in a format that's easy for the public to understand. So this report card is something that we issue each and every year, and it summarizes productivity at each annual site in kind of the simple visual way, this cartoonish way, so people can see quickly how different species performed relative to the long-term average. We feel it helps make a complex monitoring results more accessible to anyone who wants to follow what's happening across the refuge. And then also each year we publish site-specific reports for all of our monitoring sites that include kind of these long-term trends, along with the supporting information that helps explain what we observed at that location. So this slide is an example of that trend data we may compile at any annual site. So this is Cape Lisbird population trends for both MERS and black-legged kittiwakes. So now I'm going to get to the question of why are we here in Nome this year? So we're here in Nome because we are traveling to several of the refuge's periodic sites in these northern areas. The Tekla only makes this journey every 5 to 10 years, so we try to make the most of it when we come. 2018 was the last time the ship made this long journey north. So here's kind of the track of our path that we're going. We started in Unalaska, had to stop at Nunivak for a couple days, Hall Island, St. Matthew for a couple days, and now we're here at Nome.
Can I ask, how long did that take for you to travel that long road to Nome?
Well, from St. Matthew to Hall, I think it was 30 hours is what it took. So we started, gosh, what did we start? We've been on the ship for a week now. So 1 week to get all the way up here
Okay.
and make those stops. And we did some, surveys along the way as well.
Just out of curiosity, where you have the light blue where Beringia is, what is the difference in the water level in that area versus the darker blue?
Yeah, so that's like that dark transition from the light blue to dark blue is that shelf break. And that's where we find a lot of high productivity.
Find what?
It's a highly productive area. So we find like a lot of seabirds will go and feed on that shelf break. It's
How deep is it?
Yeah,
Oh.
so the darker blue is deeper water. That map that you're looking at shows that is the bathymetry, but that's just a fancy word for a map of the seafloor. So where you see the sort of from the southern Gulf of Anadir right on down to Unalaska, on the blue side, darker blue side, that's much deeper water. And on the right-hand side of that, or the north side of that, it's much lighter blue, that's shallow. And we are,
Oh, how deep?
Oh, like-
it changes a little bit.
Yeah.
You can't get it just from that, but it would be, the deep water would be around 500-600 feet in the dark blue. And when you get down to the black, down by the Aleutians, it's thousands of feet.
Yeah.
Like 4,000 feet.
And here it's more like 100.
And then from sort of St. Lawrence Island to Diomede, it's probably deep at, you'd be 200 feet would be deep.
Yeah.
And then when you get into the Chukchi, right on up to Wrangel Island and the other blue, dark blue, it's even shallower. So it's pretty shallow up there. And then you drop off into the dark blue
Oh,
and it gets to be thousands of feet
Thousands
deep
of
again.
okay.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
the question.
So I'll talk about each kind of the stops that we've made along the way here now. So our first stop was at Nunivik Island, and there we were our goal was to survey potential Aleutian tern colonies on the south and east part of the island. So this survey was part of a much larger Alaskan-wide effort to inventory Aleutian terns in the state. The species is believed to be in steep decline, but the population had never been formally estimated. So we spent 2 days there in that region, and we were able to survey 13 of the 15 possible sites that had been, well, the sites were chosen because there was a aerial survey that located colonies, but they couldn't tell from that survey if they were Arctic terns or Aleutian terns. So it took a ground survey to verify that. So that's what kind of our goal was. And yeah, I went to 13 of 15 sites and confirmed Aleutian terns on one of them. And then our next stop was on Hall Island, where we dropped a crew of 4 at one of our periodic sites. So the last time we had visited Hall with the objective specific to seabirds was in 2021. And on Hall, there's no infrastructure. There's no dry cabin, so we had to pack in a remote camp setup. And these 4 people that you see here will be living in tents and surviving on only the things that they brought with them for the next 2.5 weeks. So this crew has several objectives while stationed on Hall Island. First, they'll complete some seabird population counts at fixed plots that are there. And these will allow us to compare or make direct comparisons to counts collected at previous years on Hall Island. They will also map an auklet colony to measure any changes in the colony size, collect diet samples to record what seabirds are foraging on there, and complete an estimate of reproductive success of legend nesting seabirds. So besides the seabird work, they will also be collecting genetic data from McKay's bunting and inventorying a historic site that was an old hunting cabin on that island. And now in the local Nome area, we have inventoried a seabird colony on Sledge Island. We were just there this morning and did that count. So fresh results that I quickly put together as we're making the trip back to Nome, of how many murres, black-legged kittiwakes, and pelagic cormorants were there. And then you can compare that to what was there in 2018. And then tonight, we will depart for King Island with a number of guests from the King Island community and provide an opportunity to them to see and explore the island. And then once we leave Nome, we will travel to Cape Lisburne and the Cape Thompson area, where our objectives are pretty straightforward. We're assessing the condition of existing seabird breeding cliffs there, including plots that were formally established in 2018. So we're re-photographing those plots and the surrounding cliffs using both kind of standard cameras, and new to this trip, we're going to try drone imagery as well. And we're gathering data on seabird population trends and productivity to update our long-term records for this part of the refuge. And then once that project is done, we will head south, pick up the Hall Island camp, and conclude the trip. So once we gather and compile the data from all parts of this journey, we'll work to publish a trip report over the winter that will be a document, and that document will be available to the public. And that's kind of our main objective there. So now moving on to the second point of what we do. That was a long explanation on the study of wildlife resources. And it's a big part of what we do, but it's not the only thing. We do so much more. We also manage lands for wildlife resources and people. And by management, for the refuge, managing lands also means restoring native habitat by removing invasive species. So invasive species have reached islands through many different pathways, including shipwrecks, trapping activities, homesteading, military operations, and other government actions. Over the past 76 years, we've completed eradications on dozens of islands, including removing introduced foxes from 47 islands, cattle from 4 islands, and rats from 1 island. So these efforts help return these places to conditions that support native wildlife and reduce pressures caused by non-native species. So the first fox eradications occurred in 1949, and the most recent one was in 2017. So in total, there's been more than 1.4 million acres that have been restored by these efforts. And at this point, we've begun rechecking those islands to ensure that there are no fox on them any longer. And then we continue to see kind of positive bird response following these eradications.
Are those reindeer?
Those are cattle, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. So the refuge is now proposing to address the impacts of invasive rats on several islands, on Great Sitkin, Amchitka, Kiska, and Attu, to help restore the native ecosystem. The work is currently in the National Environmental Policy Act Environmental Impact Statement process, or the NEPA process, which evaluates potential impacts and alternatives before any action can occur and move forward. So right now, the planning phase is underway, and it is expected to be completed in the winter of 2026.
So how old or when did they come?
The rats,
When did those rats come in?
they've come at various times. I mean, to come, like I said, with any of that ship traffic and whatnot, or shipwrecks that have occurred. So some have dated back
Okay,
many, many, many decades, and some more recent.
on both sides of the shore,
Mhm.
yeah.
So the,
Is that all that invasive species? Is that further south than this region on north? The more southern Bering Sea and
that's where,
pollutions?
because of the with that rat EIS, we've focused on where that's going to occur, just for the NEPA process because it is such a cumbersome process. So we really chose areas that we thought we could effectively do that, and that's where that NEPA is going to be happening.
Interesting, thank you.
Are you guys mostly concerned with mammals as invasive species or also plants?
Also plants. Um, Actually, on the tech lab, we do have a biosecurity protocol that we follow. So we have like boot washing stations and making sure anything, if you've gotten on an island before you move to the next island, everything gets cleaned and kind of all seeds, all boots, everything gets washed up. Try to prevent that transfer of species between islands. And now, the last point I was going to make is we connect people with wildlife and resources. So part of our role is to connect the people with the refuge. And we do this by providing opportunities for communities, for students, and visitors to learn about the places we manage and the work that happens there. Sharing the vessel, the islands, and the stories behind the refuge helps build awareness and appreciation for these resources and encourages future stewardship. We also connect people with the refuge by giving them hands-on ways to learn about the places and the resources we manage. So activities like observing wildlife, using field tools, recording observations help build an understanding of how the refuge works and what makes these areas important. These kinds of experiences give participants a direct connection to the landscapes and wildlife that they define that define the refuge. We'll see if we can get the slides figured out here. That's the right one. Good job. All right, so we have an excellent visitor services and environmental education team that play an important role in connecting people to the refuge. So by involving youth in learning about wildlife, about coastal ecosystems, and the work that happens across these islands, we help build awareness and understanding that carries forward into their communities. So these programs give young participants a direct link to the refuge's resources and play a key role in engaging the broader public. So today we've covered the scope of the Alaska Maritime Refuge, the diversity of its islands, and the work that takes place across this very expansive area. So from long-term seabird monitoring to restoring native habitat and connecting people with the refuge, each part of our job supports the protection and understanding of these coastal and marine resources. So it all contributes to maintaining the health of this landscape and sharing its value with the public. So thank you for taking the time to learn about the refuge and the work that goes into caring for it. And for dealing with all the technical problems.
Yes, Matt Rustand, thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause online and here for Matt. Matt Rustand is my new hero. You plowed through that, and
Man.
I don't know what was happening with the things. So I'm going to take for the so before we ask our questions in straight science fashion, I'm going to take this jury rig down so I can actually see the chat box now. But this is the time if you're online, throw some love to Matt in the chat box because he had to power through what is an unusual situation when we found that our setup room here is not up to snuff. So thank you so much. I mean, honestly, that was beautiful presentation as well. And so show some love, and I'm going to take this offline. We've got lots of in the chat while people are trying to figure that out. Beautiful presentation. You're getting lots of good kudos online.
All right, there we go.
Yes, thank you, Straight Science audience. Now, does anyone have, and you're getting a lot of the people are so much more better at these things about hearts and emoji stuff. So you're getting lots of that. So you're making Matt happy. Any questions from the audience here, and then we'll jump online. So 1, 2.
Did you guys visit?
We did not visit.
Question.
We did not. The question was, did we visit King Island in 2018? We did not visit in 2018. When we go this year, we will do what we call a circumnav around the island. So we'll photograph the colony that we can see as we go around in an inflatable skiff, and then we'll go back and count or like stitch all those photos together and then do a count for the species that are there. So that's one objective while we're there.
What kind of birds are you looking for now? Are we gonna be seeing?
Similar pretty kittiwakes and murres for the most part. Auklet colony is there too. I mean, I've never been there, so I'm kind of excited to see what it looks like.
There'll be a lot of birds.
There will be. I hope so.
How many people are going on the King Island trip? That's pretty neat.
There's gonna be 10 people coming. We'll have a full boat coming there.
Wonderful.
Every bed will be full. So yeah, we'll have an opportunity for the people that join us to try get on island for them and do a tour. Yep.
The last time I was there in King Island was the 2025, I believe. No, 2005,
2005?
yeah,
2005. Okay, you were there?
that's the last time I was there, so it was easy for me to go up and down, but not this time.
Mhm.
So I'll see it from the vessel.
Okay.
the boat, so I'm afraid to go on exploring. Yeah, so I just got lucky. I just put my name in there. I live in Anchorage, but I was
Okay.
born there 75 years ago, so
Well, we're very happy you can come with.
I'm humble.
What an opportunity.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
With all of your current data collection happening, what patterns are you most interested in observing?
The question was, with all the data that we have been collecting, what are the patterns we're most interested in observing? So the data that we collect it's definitely geared towards a long-term data set. So we're looking at these changes that occur. I think I had mentioned like a decadal change, so over like a 10-year period. So that's the trend data that we're trying to evaluate or use to see how things are, how the birds are doing. Mhm.
Pick back what gets you guys like excited?
What gets us excited?
New drones?
No, really what gets us excited is the opportunity to be able to go to these locations and do this work. Like there's a lot of passionate people that work for the refuge that not everybody is cut out to either live on a remote island like that or like work in those kind of conditions. I mean, they're out there in the fog and the rain and the wind and yeah, it's really that's what's exciting about it. It's just being able to be at these areas that nobody really ever gets to see. And with the techno that we have, we are able to access that, and it's definitely a privilege to be able to do that.
I missed where St. Matthew's was.
Where it was?
Where is St. Matthew?
Well, we already cut the speed.
It's about 150 miles south of St. Lawrence Island.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really in the middle out there.
I have a question. Any questions online? Let me check. Nope. Book. Oh, hello from the St. Paul gang. Hey, you guys there must have good internet.
Oh yeah. Oh, Mark,
Well done. Sorry about that. You got better technology than we do operating up here right now, but your man is a hero here, Matt.
They said this is
Yeah,
I
they've
got a
got-
message from one of my crews on St. Paul Island.
Mariah.
They're saying they got their
Mariah.
fourth population replicate completed.
Well done. How's the weather down there, St. Paul? Foggy. Foggy.
Not surprising.
So I have a question. We have we're living with these seabird colonies in the Bering Strait region, and it sounds like, you do Sledge Island, King Island, that's exciting. Then are you going to Fairway and Diomede or any of those big colonies? Are those part of your refuge?
They're not. No.
They are not. Okay. Is there a way, since we're so glad you're here, we're so glad you're checking on the birds. It's kind of infrequent though, because everybody's stretched tight and you have this incredible distance you have to cover. Do you think there's a way, or is there any discussion about training up regional people from here to do annual monitoring at Sledge Island, or go to wherever else you monitor your plots? I think you showed some land at Safety Sound is also Maritime Refuge. Is there that kind of engagement that you would see benefit in having regional help every year, so that you don't have to come up once every a long time.
Right.
You could get information on the birds every year, so you could get one of your egg charts be Sledge Island, in there, because I noticed the egg charts were kind of more southerly, or that nice Cape Lisburn, rookery.
Yeah.
Is that a thought in the future? Would that be worthy of considering, or?
It's not an unprecedented concept. There's I guess I could speak for St. Paul Island, where they have their they work a lot with nymphs and doing marine mammals management. So there's a system in place where that could occur. So I mean, it's definitely something we've thought about and considered, and especially some islands where we spent more where we have our long-term camps at. It's been more of a thought of how can we engage the community to be more a part of that.
Yeah, I think
it has been a consideration.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because I think there would be interest in that opportunity for people to help. And I only say this, and my other question was going to be, you have the whole Bering Sea kind of from, what was that Bering Sea unit? I can't call it up right now, but it went kind of St. Paul, St. Matthews, St. Lawrence, Norton Sound, and stops at Diomede, yeah? Kind of
Bering Strait.
the Bering, yeah. So in that, we have seen so much change, and also getting at the trawl question too, so that southern Bering Sea and the northern Bering Sea marine ecosystems, at least for this region, we have seen tremendous change, whereas the ice has been, we've had some crazy years, right? With no sea ice, 2017, 2018, and we're probably about to get another one with the big El Nino and coming our way. So is there a trend you're seeing? Are you seeing differences between the southern Bering Sea birds and the northern Bering Sea? How they're doing, or does it not matter? Does it not matter? Or there's no, it matters, but is it not pronounced change difference?
I would say it's not pronounced. It is kind of, it seems more regional than that. When I look I'm just trying to envision what the report card looks like for productivity and whatnot.
We've had big die-offs of seabirds starting in 2017, 2018, 2019, almost every single year up until the last 2 or 3. Multi-species, all seabirds. So I was just wondering if we've seen that, if that was commonplace elsewhere. Maybe that's the thing.
Locally again, yeah.
Just that's a local thing.
Yeah, St. George, St. Paul, the last 2 years they've had some harmful algal bloom issues or die-offs with seabirds. So again, but that was a local product. Heather Renner, she was the current refuge manager. She had written the MER paper that came out that kind of highlighted the huge murder die-off that occurred in this whole region. I can't say we've seen anything like that since that time.
Ours were more like multi. We had kittiwakes and
Mhm.
shearwaters and murders were part of that. And
The bird flu and then loss of dietary source.
yeah, that's what we
That's where the
sort of
conclusion-
starvation seems to be the big thing. And
Yeah.
then the avian flu, I'm glad you brought that up. Are you guys testing for avian influenza, or do you have any news to bring us because just so you're aware, in 2026, this year,
Mhm.
we have it confirmed by the USDA here in Nome, in eider, common eider, I think a fox in Nome that was hit by a car, and a mink in White Mountain. Those were all confirmed, 2026. So that eider kind of makes us, and there will be some news. I think we just had my freezer got tested for all the birds, dead birds that were.
Just came through academia,
Yep, the St. Jude Webby lab came. They did a straight science with do you know Andy Ramey with
Yep.
Lisa Kircher from St. Jude's and the Webby lab of St. Jude Regional Children's Hospital, Andy Ramey of the United States Geological Survey.
Mhm.
They were doing some swabbing of waterfowl, and then they went through my freezer as well, and I think there'll be some news forthcoming as soon as they can get the USDA to look at their
Mhm.
work that they did.
Right. So what we've done with avian, our contribution to that is like at our camps that when we're doing our work, we will collect, at times we will collect dead birds and then submit them for testing. So that's kind of our role is gathering where that's actually occurring. So last year, again, we worked with the Migratory Birds Management with Rob to get those samples sent in to the health center and then try to get those results out to the communities where they came from.
Any from here in this
No,
region?
we weren't
Okay.
here,
You
so,
here,
yeah.
that's right. You weren't here. Okay. All right. Yeah, because we have a big concern in the region because of we've had 3 glaucous gulls test positive in 2022, confirmed
Mhm.
with H5N1. And so, our seabirds, and then we have marine mammals. And is that going to be, they're all swimming around, and marine mammals sort of lie underneath those seabird cliffs and they poop down on them.
Affects all the way up to marine life, all the way big as walrus, they tested positive.
Yes, so this year in Svalbard, in the Atlantic, this is why we're concerned. 2 walruses and a polar bear have died of avian influenza. How did they get it? And then 3 polar bear in Utqiagvik have died of, not this year, but total since 2022. 3 polar bear have died of the bird flu. So we have a concern about seabirds and
Mhm.
crossover into our other marine wildlife that are so important both for conservation but also for food. Yeah, absolutely, for subsistence and food security here in the region. So what's happening to the birds, we're all in on that. So we really look forward to, I don't know if you'll come back, because after this experience with the technology, you may say no, but maybe you can do it via Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah, from your
Well, one thing
office.
for sure, our reports are public, and we do try to push those out, and like I'll be pushing it to you probably
Yeah.
for this trip especially, and we try to get them shared with as many people as possible.
What do you say? Should we get him back and he can do a Zoom on for straight science?
For what we found up in
Yeah, what they found on their trip and their King Island experience. I think that would be wonderful for everyone in the region
I don't know if I should be the one talking about King Island though.
Well, we can do a duel with King Island. I don't know anything about it, so it sounds like it's set up with the tribe.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be King Island Native community, and you could do a Zoom or in person, however you guys want to do it. We could talk about experiences, or I think people would be really interested to learn what you guys experienced living on the ship and everything.
I have a
Mhm.
question. How do you, like, come up with the numbers of birds? Like, how do you count them? What do you
They're
It's like-
flying around, how do you keep
Just-
track?
Yeah,
So the counts that we do are birds that are actually on the cliff. So not birds that are flying. So
Right.
they are stationary. And like when we were out at Sledge here, we inventoried the entire colony. So there we were in a Achilles or a skiff and traveled around that colony and just we have clickers in each hand and field glasses and we're just for each species we'll count as many as that there are.
Hmm.
Do you
Um,
group them, kind of?
yeah, you try to use like physical features on the cliff to break them up to make the counting a little bit easier. When you're going up and down and up and down, it's challenging. So we do try to take multiple counts and then average them to get an estimate of how many birds are out there.
Hmm.
And then other locations, like when we go up to Cape Thompson, there we've taken photographs of the cliffs and then broken it into like plots. So we actually drawn areas on a
Grid.
yeah, like a grid on a photograph. And so now we'll go back and count that same grid. And we try to go back and count that same grid each time we visit that location. That's what gives us a better kind of idea of how much change is happening.
So who is doing the studying on algae?
On the harmful algal blooms. We'll collect samples of bird feces and of mussels, and then I send them to Sarah Shane at the USGS. She analyzes the samples and produces results back to us.
Okay, so
And they publish that. They kind of publish all their data. They have an interface where they make that public as well.
And we've also had Sarah Shane on it for Straight Science. She's sort of the one she did a recent one on the birds that she's been given. So she is collecting the birds from a number of places like the Maritime National Wildlife Refuge. I think when we get birds, we're sampling them I'm housing them, right, archiving them, letting them build up this summer. And we'll send those probably to her as well. So she does a lot of that. There's for the birds, she does the algae in the, so they'll look at the guts and the unuk and things. Are you talking about in the ocean water?
yep.
Yeah. Do you have on board, we're learning, right? We do regionals. It's not a very big effort, but we're doing it and we're growing it regionally. Seawater sampling. Savunga's doing Unilaclete. We do it every week and we have people trained here to read the water and identify the algae. Is it good algae? Is it bad algae? That's
NOAA territory? NOAA?
no, this is here in our region and that's
Okay,
with
where
the
is it?
communities.
Oh,
No, this is tribal. Tribal.
Okay.
And but on the large research vessels, there's a machine that we've all been talking about here called an imaging flow cytobot, which is kind of an artificial intelligence driven video that runs water constantly through from the ship saltwater opening right through into the sink. And it's taking video footage and the AI is identifying. And it will send an alert when you hit a certain density, like, oh, you may have a problem. We're seeing all of a sudden a lot of this kind. We don't want to see this kind. We see it. Those machines, we just wonder if you probably from your, okay, you don't have one on board. I think that's probably what you were asking. But those machines are, that's a really new technology that's helping, all the researchers are now turning to put one of those on the ship so they can get the problem with that, which is wonderful. And the ships are wonderful to share that. But for us living here, they're on the move. Like you're here.
Right.
And you're on the move. It gives us a warning, though. If they see something pop off in the Bering Strait or by St. Lawrence Island or up north of Wales, then we can go, we need to start sampling near shore. So that's a really pertinent Bering Strait question. Thank you for that. We had a very, very large bloom of Alexandrium cantanella, which produces saxitoxin, which can hurt wildlife. And actually, I don't know if you're aware, but in 2022, we had the most massive, most persistent and most toxic and highest cell counts globally.
Hmm.
Yeah, right in the strait. Like the highest reading was a mile east of Diomede in August of 2022.
Yeah, that's been an interesting thing to follow. I've just kind of gotten up to speed on that HAB network and yeah, just all the perfect right conditions have to be present in order for that bloom to occur. But yeah, it seems like it's been happening more frequently lately.
Yeah, I'm gonna lose my battery.
Just next question. So you're in charge of the Bering Sea chunk of your guys' like separated
Yep.
maritime sections. You're based in Homer, so I'm assuming there's another one of you for the other chunks, or do you cover multiple?
So yeah, I cover the Bering Sea and the Chukchi, and then there's two other biologists that one covers the um, Gulf of Alaska and Alaska Peninsula, and then another covers the Aleutians.
And is the Tekla kind of just generally on the move and you guys have to fly out to meet it, or is it usually based in Homer for like a good part of?
It is on the move in the summer. It'll come back in the middle of summer for a resupply, and then the tech will go out and resupply the fuel camps one time. But yeah, it is always on the move.
Yeah.
So it leaves mid-May, comes back. It comes back to our field camps in early September, but then it does another run for another agency.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Very cool. My mother-in-law loves the ship for some reason.
Oh, really?
She sees it all the time when she is doing like tour stuff in Homer and Seward. And I didn't know what boat we were on. And then she was like, I bet you're on the Tekla. And I was like, the what? And we looked it up and I was like, oh, it's in Nova. So I guess you're right. I guess you're right. I don't know if she's ever done like one of the open houses though, but
Mhm.
she keeps tabs on it.
Yeah, I'm glad there's so many people out there today to take part in that. That was
Yeah, it
that was a
sounds
lot of
like
fun.
a lot of people in Nome. There's 80 or so more.